Welcome back to the marketplace. This is our look at the free agency period, with all roads now leading to NBL 25. Been a couple of weeks since we've been at the desk. A lot to get through on today's show, though. I'm Jack Heverin. As always, it is great to see the best newsbreaker in Australian basketball, Olgun Uluc, and Olgun, a fair bit to catch up on today.
Lots has been happening. We've had some imports signing, which is slightly rare at this time of year, but it's really exciting. Cairns Taipans getting busy, and I'm glad to have Ruck as well. So this is going to be really cool.
We can see the man on screen from Brisbane in that sunny Brisbane weather. He looks nice and relaxed. Ruck, I know you've been doing a lot of work on these depth charts.
I have, and it's such an exciting period. The free agency market, although most of the local talent is signed, now we get into the import season and a lot of unknown talented pieces that will be entering the league. But Olgun, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say, especially about this new signing up in Cairns.
Let's start then with the Cairns Taipans. As we go to air and record today, the Taipans have just recently announced an import signing, which is exciting for them.
Yeah, their first import of the season, Tanner Groves, is a 6'9", 6'10", big man, high IQ guy. The first thing I did when I saw this signing, I texted Dave Patrick, who was an associate head coach at OU when Tanner Groves was at Oklahoma University, and he had a lot to say about him. He said he's more of a face-up guy than a post-up guy, high IQ player. The shot is real.
Yep.
I think it's low volume, but it's real as a pick and pop threat. And we saw what Adam Ford said in the press release as well. The fact that he wants to play him alongside Sam Waldenberg, and it fulfills the trend of big man that Fordy likes, which is these big, long, versatile guys that can all sort of stretch the floor. He can play 4 out, 5 out. It fits the mold of what Fordy's always been looking for with these bigs.
Based off the little highlights that we've seen, Ruck, how does Groves and Waterberg playing next to each other grab you?
Well, I think it will work really well, and I think what Cairns needed to do was reduce the amount of overlap with some of their bigs last season. Most of them were really in the paint. Josh Roberts couldn't get a lot of minutes because he couldn't extend the floor. And I think what you mentioned there, Olgun, Groves' ability to face up, I think that will allow penetration lanes. And I thought last year with Tajir McCall and Pat Miller, they were just too congested. Sometimes their offense looked really 90s style, and I think Ford is looking to modernize the shape of that offense. And I think that would lead to a lot more victories.
So I've seen a little bit of Tanner Groves. I was based in Oklahoma City a few years ago, so I got to a bunch of Oklahoma University games. I did the drive down to Norman to see him, and you could see what the skill set is. He's a skilled big. I'm intrigued to see who he guards in the NBL. He's slightly undersized, 6'9", 6'10". Who does he guard? How does he play alongside Sam Waldenberg, and how do they both exist defensively? I'm really intrigued to see this, but he was in the Big 12, right? He's athletic enough to compete in that conference. How he translates to this level is something that I think a lot of people around the league are interested to see.
So you can see the Cairns depth chart on your screen right now. That's as it stands at this point in time. So one change, Derek, from the last time I guess we got together on the marketplace is that with the addition of Groves, we've got Kyron Galloway coming off the bench.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good spot for him right now. I'm not totally sold on him, Olgun, as a 25-plus minutes per game type player. And I think this will allow him to fit in up in Cairns and kind of find his role like we started to see from him at the end of his Adelaide stint. He can shoot the ball really well. But I think he's a guy who in new surroundings can grow, but you're going to have to kind of nurture him into the role so that you can get the best out of him.
So I think the reason Galloway went to Cairns was for an increased opportunity. And so while the depth chart we have does have Groves starting at the 5, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if that's Galloway starting at the 5 or Wardenberg at the 5 and Galloway at the 4. It wouldn't surprise me to see this mix and match, right? I think that's the beauty of the bigs that Adam Ford has. Even Nicole Degak is someone who can be a role threat, can be a pop threat as well, someone who can stretch the floor. So I don't think this necessarily means less minutes for Galloway or more for Groves or anything like that. I think that Fordy probably likes these 4 bigs almost equally and will mix and match them how he sees fit.
So we've spoken about this from day one almost with the Cairns Taipans since our live show, that 2-3 spot or that wing position. Any movement there?
Yeah, so right now it seems pretty bare because it's just Taron Armstrong as the point guard, and that's someone who they are building around, right? They've been vocal about that they want to make sure that he's the focal point of what they do. I'm told that there is a shooting guard that is lined up, that they have in mind to bring in very soon. And so they've got that locked in, and then they have a third import spot. And that's something that I think they'll wait on. Because right now you've got Taron Armstrong, who's in America, just got invited to the G League Elite camp. There is a non-zero chance that he gets a two-way contract.
Okay.
If he does get a two-way contract, then it'd be nice for this Taipans team to have that third import spot up their sleeve in case they need to go get a point guard. If Taron Armstrong stays and they can go get a wing, then you'd have Armstrong, import, and then your versatile bigs. But I think they're going to be a bit cautious with that import spot and maybe save it in the case that Taron Armstrong gets a two-way contract.
More news coming from the Cairns Taipans in the next few days, which is exciting. Great news, Ruck, for southeast Melbourne. They wanted an import point guard as soon as Will McDowell-White informed them he wouldn't be coming. And boy, they landed a good one in Derek Walton Jr.
We know what he's capable of, Jack. He's a big-time player. He was consistent all season long with the Sydney Kings in that championship run in which he became the grand final MVP. Just a really, really professional point guard. And now all of a sudden, Southeast Melbourne, Olgun, it looks like they're starting to put something together. Some might say it looks really good. Some might say it's a house of cards. But on surface, you kind of got to like what they've done thus far in accumulating some talent.
Yeah, so there are a few things with this that I'm so intrigued about. The first one is how someone like Derek Walton Jr., the talent level that he is, fits alongside Mitch Creek, Nathan Sobey. We saw him with Sydney, and it was alongside a shooter like Dejan Vasiljevic and a connector like Xavier Cooks. Mitch Creek is someone who has the ball in his hands a little bit more. Nathan Sobey often has the ball in his hands a little bit more. So I'm intrigued at the fit there. One thing I'm excited about, and Ruck, I'm interested to hear your take on this, is how efficient and how effective can Nathan Sobey be? Because I think this might be the best point guard who he'll ever play next to in the NBL. I don't know if he's played next to a better point guard in the NBL than Derek Walton Jr. And so we've seen Sobey's efficiency take a dip over the past few seasons because he hasn't had that elite point guard next to him. He's had the ball in his hands a lot. What will happen to his efficiency? Will we see that spike, that almost Olympian Nathan Sobey, with someone with the creation advantage skills of Derek Walton Jr.?
Well, you would hope it would be a reduction in the hero shots, and that's not a knock on Nathan because sometimes those hero moments were required. And sometimes they paid off and put the bullets in good situations or near win situations. But now, with more talent around him and with Walton Jr. as a point guard leading that team, you would think that Nathan's opportunities like that would be minimized. And in that smaller space to play that type of basketball, he could be better. So in Brisbane, if he had, 8 big shots a game and made 2 of them, maybe with Southeast Melbourne, he gets 4 big-time shots, and he makes 3 of them. Now he has a greater impact on winning basketball games, and it's something that he's capable of. And I think us purists who love the game want to see Nathan get to that level. Now, a lot of that is going to come down to not only Derek Walton Jr., but the coaching staff. How do they coach that team? Are they able to get the instructions that they want actually applied out there on the floor? And look, it's just not Sobey. There are other guys that are going to be trying to prove themselves in that Southeast Melbourne lineup also. Creaky's not coming back and taking a step back. He's still going to be seen as the leader, the best player in that team, and one of the top 5 players in the competition.
So next up for the Phoenix is an import wing. We've known that for a while, that's a position they're chasing, so they'll look for that. And then I'm just intrigued we look at this depth chart and the names on this roster, who will actually be there, right? And we mentioned the Asia outs, we've mentioned them ad nauseum, because these are guys who will, I think, use those Asia outs if they have to. And so you look at Creaky, Geordie Hunter, even Derek Walton Jr. has an Asia out in his contract. That's somewhat scary going into a preseason with that sort of uncertainty. But if this team is out there, as it's written here, then this is one of the elite teams of the NBL. What
do you think, Ruck? Is there a concern there from a Phoenix point of view?
No doubt, from a psychological point of view, because what happens all of a sudden, you go through that tough patch, which every team is going to go through. You look at Tasmania last year, they had that run of games where they just could not finish a close game, and they had a patch of losses that they probably didn't deserve. Now, they're a better basketball team with a better infrastructure than Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. So when the Phoenix go through that tough times, and you already, by legality, by contract, you basically, with an Asia out, you got 1 foot out the door. I don't care what you're saying. You know you've always got a way to get out. And I don't think that's how you build a solid foundation with a program that's just had a disastrous season. Olgun, again, I'm sacrificing talent for security, solidarity, unity, all that type of stuff. I want to know guys really want to be here for 2-3 seasons.
Let's jump from the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix to the Illawarra Hawks. When we did the live marketplace show, a lot of questions from Hawks fans about Tyler Harvey, understandably so. Good news in the last few days, new 3-year deal.
It took them a while to get this contract on the table for Tyler Harvey, but they eventually did. It took some negotiating, some back and forth, but ultimately Tyler Harvey ends up back in Illawarra through the 2026-27 season. So this would be his 7th season with Illawarra Hawks, which is great, obviously, for the league to see imports retained for that amount of time. We saw the way that Harvey's game, I'd say, improved when Justin Tatum took over. I think it changed a little bit. I think he became more effective, more efficient. So they like what they saw in him, and then obviously the next step for them is locking in the other imports. So that's Gary Clark and whomever else they're going to bring at the point guard spot, because Justin Robinson's not coming back.
Ruck, you spoke about this a lot during the semi-final series, that you like the way that Tyler Harvey's game evolved over the course of last season.
Tyler's a really intelligent guy, and he's a very good basketball player. And he gets punished a lot by us in the media for the bad shots that he takes. But, you know, in that final stretch there with Justin Tatum, he played much better basketball. He was more prudent with his choices and his shot selection, very similar to how he was under Brian Gorgon. And now with the security of this contract, it may allow him to settle more into that good basketball mode and not feel like he has to do everything. Also, knowing that you have a very good coach and a guy that's going to be around for a while, someone else that you believe and who you know trusts you, you know, I think all those things really add up. And if they add a solid point guard, and Justin Robinson came in with a lot of accolades, it didn't work out. He never played to the level we thought he would, although he had some big moments in the playoffs this season. If they can bring in a guy that can give them more than Justin Robinson with all the other pieces they have, they're going to be a top 6 team. You can guarantee that. And I just think there's a belief down there in the Gong. And, you know, a little success down there goes a long way towards sustainable excellence.
So I think the big thing with Tyler Harvey is expectations. After his first season, he was a top 3 MVP guy, right? All NBL first team. And so all of a sudden, when you don't meet those expectations, you look like a failure in the eyes of many looking from the outside in, even though he was completely respectable as a basketball player, right? He filled his role as he should have. Now, I don't think there's that expectation. We saw a team with Gary Clark as its best player, and Tyler Harvey was sort of second fiddle import, and when he needed to make big shots, he did, but when he needed to be a connector or just a floor spacer, he was able to do that too. So I think going into a 3-year deal where the expectations are somewhat tempered is probably a really good thing for them. I'm intrigued to see if they're going to be able to get over the line with Gary Clark. As of now, there is no agreement. The money that is being asked for is very high. The Illawarra Hawks have a directive every season to stay under the cap, and that's very tough to do when you have high money imports, because there are no mechanisms to reduce the cap spend on those guys. And so whether they're able to get that over the line is going to be the next big thing. Their bench is sorted. Their local core is locked in. It's the same one as last season, and I think it was really solid. Whether they can get that high level import, the guy that's going to be the sort of that alpha to Tyler Harvey, we'll have to wait and see. That's
coming up very shortly for the Illawarra Hawks. Hopefully, we have heard that Justin Tatum is currently overseas taking a look at all options. To the New Zealand Breakers, great to see Grant Anticevic rejoin the NBL. He's been playing in Germany and been shooting the basketball nicely. Just another piece of the puzzle. I was interested to hear Modi Mayor's interview with Peter Hooley last week on the Huddle, and it feels like it's coming together nicely for the Breakers.
Yeah, I think the Breakers are really interesting. They're betting on a lot of guys.
Yeah.
You're betting on Mojave King. You're betting on Jonah Bolden taking a step up. And you're betting on Grant Anticevic, who, during his time with the Phoenix, he was okay. He had spot minutes off the bench, but was never really able to flourish. Now, he went to Germany. The Breakers have really strong ties in Europe, and so they did their intel, and all the intel out of Germany, out of the team that Anticevic is on, is good. The shot is real. He's well liked by his team and his teammates, and so they're taking a bet on it. That this is a rangy four-man who could really stretch the floor. If you can get the most out of him, like if you can get the most out of Harvey King and help Jonah Bolden get to that next level, then the ceiling of this Breakers team is really high.
Here's the depth chart from a Breakers point of view, Derek, and I think the big takeaway from that interview with Pete last week is a five-man in the Derek Pardon mould. He would love it to be Derek Pardon, but it's not going to be. But a five-man in that mould is their next priority.
Yeah, and that's a big one because I actually liked what Mango Matiang brought in the second half of the season, but they've decided, both parties are going in a different direction. So Montemayor is he's going for an import big. And one thing we know about the Breakers over the past couple of seasons is they haven't missed when it comes to the import selections. Now, keep in mind that with a skeleton team that they had in that play-in game down in Wollongong, they came a PJC three-pointer that went in and out from playing in the semifinals. And you look at that roster and how competitive they were down the stretch. If they had some pieces in the import positions, they're a top four team. I like what they've done with the Australians. I think all those guys that they've brought in have a chip, have something to prove. Jonah Bolden is going to be better for having that season with Sydney. I think he'll be in a position where he will be challenged. He'll be required to play good basketball, and I think that's fundamental to his DNA as a basketball player. Mojave King's been up here working with me 3 times a week. He looks significantly better than the last time I saw him. Mitch McCarron, Olgun, perfect place for him to go. I thought it was here or Brisbane. Here or New Zealand. But it didn't work out, whatever happened here. So now he gets to go down and be that true utility player. There's no pressure on him to try and score. He needs to improve his spot-up shooting. But I think what they've assembled there early on looks pretty good. And, of course, it's all built around the threat and just the brilliance of PJC.
Some of the other signings from recent news since we last caught up. Jonah Antonio re-signed to the Cairns Taipans. Olgun told us all about that, the reshaping and not taking up options, so he could get a better deal, which is good for him. Alex Starling returning to the 36ers, which is good news, and some really talented youngsters coming to the NBL this season on DP contracts.
Yeah, there are a few that I wanted to highlight. Luke Fennell is one who's headed to Southeast Melbourne. That's a one-year development player deal. Now, he is someone who could be their point guard of the future.
Yep.
He's a 6'6" point guard, one of the best under 18 prospects in the country, right? So if he can turn out to what his potential dictates he could be, then I'm really intrigued to see not just the future for him, but whether they sprinkle him into their rotation this season as well. We saw someone like Ozzy Rapp get some minutes this season. Granted, that was because of injuries, but this team, I don't think, is against playing a young guy like Luke Fennell. And then Kai Savage is an interesting one. 3-year deal with Brisbane Bullets, DP for the first 2 seasons, then a roster spot team option for the final year. He's a 6'1" combo guard, a volume shooter. Can he turn into something interesting? I think an interesting comp for him is Isaac White, who's on that team.
Yep.
Can he develop a consistent jump shot like we've seen from Isaac White over the years? We'll wait and see. But these are 2 high-level guys coming to the NBL through the development player pathway.
Great to have Aussies taking up these DP spots and playing in these positions, which is fantastic. We'll get to some of the other teams before we finish up, and we'll fly through some of the other depth charts. But a story here of yours, which is very much in the marketplace wheelhouse. And Ruck, I know how much you love these stories as well. And that is total spends for the season just gone. Your story is live on ESPN.com.au and, of course, all of your platforms. What did we learn from it?
Look, we learned a few things. Now, this is a story I did last season. I like to do it every season from now on. But I'm able to get the total cash spend and the cap spend of each NBL team. When it comes to the cash spend, I spend a lot of time doing the calculations myself, where you get the contract value, and then for imports, you have to take into account the different fees that teams have to take into account. You have to use the real USD to AUD exchange rate. The league uses a different one when they're calculating not just the contract value, but the cap spend of that player. So all of this stuff is taken into account. I do the calculations and ultimately end up with the Perth Wildcats spending more than, or basically double the salary cap when it comes to their cash spend. Now, a lot of that has to do with Todd Blanchfield and Mitch Norton still being on their books in a way. So they did have to pay out a portion of those contracts, and that hits both their cash spend, obviously, and their cap spend for this season. And then the interesting one, I thought, as well, was the Cairns Taipans. Because they're at the bottom in cash spend. Just over $2 million they spent this season. And when it came to their cap spend, when they ultimately did the calculations, they were around $6,000 over the salary floor. Now, you need to meet that salary floor. There is an obligation for you to meet that. If you don't, there are obviously ramifications there, but they had an opportunity to marquee Bull Kowal, who was on a high-money contract. They didn't do that, because if they marqueed Bull Kowal, then their cap spend would have come down. They wouldn't have met the salary floor. And so this was a team that wasn't able, that had the lowest budget in the league. They weren't able to spend a lot, and they weren't even able to use the mechanisms in place to lower your cap spend, because they just reached that salary floor at the best of times.
And Ruck, one of the other big takeaways for me when I saw this list, and we don't need to go back over old ground when it comes to Adelaide, but second in the competition for spend, and that season was a disaster for them. I think they'd just like to wipe that one from memory, wouldn't they?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yes, Jack. But, Scott Ninnis did come in at the end and put a little bit, I'm not going to say shine, he probably reduced the dull a little bit. So he kind of saved face. But when you look at that total cap spend of $3.3 million, Olgun, that's rough to swallow for the type of season that they had. Now, they did give hope to their fans towards the end of the season, but Uluc come out the big winners, I thought. Perth, you got to drop money. That's what they've always done. And, you finish in the top four, maybe the fade out, the flame out in the semifinal series wasn't great. But Tasmania, though, surprising, Jack, how much they're willing to drop. They try and play little brother. They're out there spending. They're putting money out there, and that's what you got to do to some extent. But just because you spend, it doesn't mean you win. You have to have a lot of the other things in place, like your coaching, your work ethic amongst your players, and the belief system and how you go about your business. So I think Tasmania, they really got it right. And for that reason, Olgun, they continue to show up late in the playoffs, and I can't see how that changes over the next 2 to 3 seasons.
So 3 things. One, I completely agree. Spending doesn't equal winning. Last season, the numbers dictated that the top 3 teams didn't even make the playoffs.
Yep.
Right. I think three of the bottom 4 teams in cash spend last season were in the top 4. So spending doesn't equal winning. We know that by now. We also don't want to demonize spending. It is good when teams.
It's definitely not.
It is good when teams spend money, right? We complain when guys like Nick Kay are making all that money in Japan, and then people complain that the Sydney Kings are spending overs on someone like Xavier Cooks. No, we want the best talent in the NBL, right? We know this.
Yep.
On Adelaide, a big portion of their both cash hit and the cap spend went to Jamal Franklin.
Oh, dear.
Someone who didn't play a game in the NBL. I don't know if he played one game at the Blitz.
Yep.
That hurts.
I remember this very vividly in the Gold Coast. He was cut the day after that game. They paid him initially like he was going to be their star player, their best player. And he ended up being not just a not functional import in the NBL, but just not a very functional player in the NBL. And that one was annoying because make one phone call to anyone in the world of basketball, and they would have told you that he probably wasn't at the level of the NBL. So that's where a lot of their cash and cap spend goes to. Someone like him that had to pay out a lot of his deal. The Tasmania one is always fun because they spent a decent amount of money on their imports. And ultimately, when you do the calculations and get to the cash spend of those guys, those numbers go up a lot when you use the real USD to AUD exchange rate and take in all the other fees. They spent a decent amount of money, and I think they're going to probably spend more next season.
Your point about not demonising spending is a very, very good one. This is competitive sport. This is not community sport. You've got to spend to win sometimes, and you've got to spend to be competitive. So I'm here for it.
If you spend, spend a lot,
let me jump in right second.
Of course.
Let me jump in, guys, because sitting here in Brisbane, in one of the most prosperous cities in Australia, for the Bullets only to spend 1.7 is laughable. And I know they're probably, with the new ownership, they're probably working their way up. But you got to go out and find some money. There's plenty of money in this season. For them to be 9th in total spend, come on, man. Get some money, spend some money, get some players up in here.
Yeah, so the Bullets, so they were 2.8 in cash spend. A lot of that would have been reduced because of Aaron Baines being marqueed. So around 25% of the value of his contract hit the cap. So they were able to reduce his cap spend a lot. They also had a bunch of injuries which reduced their cap spend, so they ultimately stayed under the cap. But their hands were tied with that Aaron Baines contract, and I think they were open about that early on as well. They really had no opportunities to make significant moves because of that. Now they had a lot of money ready for Will McDowell-White. The expectation is that they'll have a lot of money ready for this import point guard that they'll eventually bring in.
And that should be sooner rather than later. We'll get to the Bullets very soon. Let's fly through some of the other teams and just a bit of an update of where they're at right now and their depth charts. We start with Melbourne United because we've heard absolutely nothing from them so far. Now, they haven't got an enormous amount of business to do, but when you see that depth chart, the gap in the big man department is obvious.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of waiting and seeing with Luke Travers. I think United is preparing for him to probably get some sort of deal with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So they are scouring the market to fill both of those front court positions. If it's not Jack White and they have an interest in bringing Jack White back into the fold, Jack White has an interest in remaining within that NBA pathway. So those two things obviously do not compute. But if Jack White does want to come back, there is a spot there for within Melbourne United. They have his rights as well, and so that's an easy fit. If not, then I expect them to go import with that 4 and 5 spot, which isn't something we've seen from them lately. We saw it a little bit with Jordan Caroline last season. That didn't turn out great. But then they got Marcus Lee. Now, Marcus Lee is someone who there is some interest in, but the feel is that they're looking for someone at slightly higher level, maybe closer to that JLA level than Marcus Lee. But I think they'll go down the road with some high-level imports at the 4 and 5 and then see what happens.
To the Perth Wildcats, as they look at the moment, Ruck, their depth chart screams probably a 4-man, doesn't it? It seems as though Christian Doolittle might spend more time at the 3 potentially or the 4, but where do you see this remaining import spot for them? What should their priority be?
Jack, they need perimeter shooting. We saw what happened when Tasmania were able to throttle Bryce Cotton. No one else could shoot the ball from the perimeter. We saw what happened when Keanu Pender went down. They were deficient in the big man department. No one could put up resistance in the interior. So I see those two areas where they're most fragile. Now, could you cover it with a really good swing man who can rebound, knock down jumpers? Someone like Casey Prather 5 years ago, Olgun. That would be ideal out there. But I still think they've got to get another big to help Keanu Pender. He carries a big burden out there. Doolittle isn't as polished an offensive player as I would like him to be, but he's still young. He's still early in his professional career. There's time for him to develop. It needs to happen now in the lead up to next season. But, they look fragile in that series against Tasmania, and I think there are some areas of concern.
So this is where we approach a problem with the Perth Wildcats in that they have one spot remaining, which is an import spot, but I think they need a wing of some sort, and I think they know they need a wing. So that's generally what they've been targeting with that import spot. I think we also agree that they need a 5 of some sort. And so they have a next star spot there, and so it wouldn't surprise me if they chase a wing with that import spot, and then a 5-man with a next star spot. The thing I'm then intrigued by is, Ruck, you speak about the sort of relief valves that you need for release valves for Bryce Cotton, right? When he gets doubled, who are you kicking this ball to? They've signed Elijah Pepper, who they're confident can make an impact as a rookie this season. And then you're looking at Ben Henschel. And if they bring in a wing player, then you have Ty Webster, Bryce Cotton, Elijah Pepper, this wing player. Where is the fit for someone like Ben Henschel, who is one of the rising stars in Australian basketball, someone we want to see hit the floor? But it's tough to see him sharing the floor with Elijah Pepper defensively. I don't know if you can't play Pepper, Henschel, and Cotton all at the same time defensively. I'm intrigued where you see the fit and the minutes for someone like Ben Henschel.
Olgun, we see it right around the world. Some coaches seem predisposed to play veteran players. They have an innate confidence in them, and I'm wondering if John really is one of those guys. Like, Rick Carlisle was like that for years in the NBA. And I thought there were moments last season when Ben Henschel could have gotten time. Michael Harris, I thought, could have gone in there and just given them some pop, some youth, some animation out there on the floor when some other guys weren't getting it done. Ty Webster, very good basketball player, but Olgun, he needs to find a level of stability and consistency. Hot, cold, the 3 ball's on, the 3 ball disappears for 6 weeks. So there is opportunity for Pepper Henschel. There's an opportunity for them, but it's only going to be possible if John really believes in them, and maybe he feels they've got to learn the league and they're just not experienced and gamed enough in the NBL to put them out there at critical moments.
So you want more of an Indiana Pacers Rick Carlisle as opposed to a Dallas Mavericks Rick Carlisle. Dallas Mavericks Rick Carlisle isn't playing rookies. He's not playing young guys. Indiana Pacers Rick Carlisle, he's throwing the ball out there, letting them run, letting them have fun. Is that your expectation for John Riley this coming season, or is that your hope?
And well, it's both. And I haven't spoken to JR about any of this, but you're right about Rick Carlisle. He learned, he adapted. He was criticized for being too rigid. I'm not saying Johnny is there, but I would like to see him find moments. And this is tough, Jack, because you've heard about how Andrew and I are always talking about stop subbing so much. Why do you need to sub? But you don't need to go overboard with it and overcorrect it with Bryce where you're playing the legs off of him. Find moments to get those guys in there at critical times, the younger guys, and see what they can do. You don't have to ride with them for a long time. Give them a couple of minutes at the end of a quarter. Give them 3 minutes at the end of the half. Let them dip their toes in the water, feel the temperature, and then you're able to judge how you feel you want to proceed with them. But it's an interesting thing. It's a coaching philosophy. It's a learning evolution for John, really. But he continues to grow as a coach and someone who you guys know I have the utmost respect for his coaching ability.
Adelaide 36ers and their depth chart. We've spoken about them a lot in terms of the sins of last season. As it stands right now, though, there was a flourish of movement early. Jacob Rigoni added in the last 24 hours for a bit of depth. Great South Australian youngster, which is good to see. What's next for Adelaide?
Yeah, so they've lent into a bunch of South Australians and like Mayan, Jacob Rigoni, Alex Starling, obviously not from Adelaide, but he's been based there for a good amount of time. Right now, it's all eyes on imports. Their local contingent is complete. And so there are 3 imports that they're looking to fill. You've got that point guard spot, you've got a wing, and then you have a 4-man. We're still waiting to see them pull the trigger on one. It wouldn't surprise me if they get up to Summer League without having signed one yet and figure out their movements then. But that's the feel. And to be honest, when you look at this depth chart, I think they've got a nail.
Yeah.
At the very least 2 of those imports, but probably all 3, because there are some concerns with that depth. And so I think it's really important for this team to nail those 3 imports, because Vasiljevic and Humphries is a really good starting situation. It's a really good position for your core to be in, but you need to round them out with 3 really quality imports.
Sydney Kings were active early. Xavier Cooks, Bull Qual, tick. Great signings. Alex Tui is coming back as a next star, which is exciting. They've got a lot of depth on their bench as well. At the moment, a gap exists at the 5 and a gap exists at the 1.
So that gap at the 5, the expectation that I have is that if there are going to be spot minutes at the 5, let's say there'll be an import 5 spot, right? An import will fill that 5 spot, and then the backup 5 I think will be shared amongst Xavier Cooks. Kelly Lupepe can play up to the 5, and Jason Spurgeon, who they signed as a DP, multi-year deal, goes into a roster spot toward the end of that deal. He's someone who they think can make an impact now if he needs to. Now, he's someone who had roster spot offers from other teams. We talk about the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. They need a backup 5. They weren't able to get Spurgeon over the line, nor were the 36ers. The Kings were able to get that done, and shout out to the fact that Luke Longley and Andrew Bogut exist on that team, because that's a really hard thing for a young big to say no to, the potential of developing around those guys. But Spurgeon, I think, can play some spot minutes, and then there's that starting 1 spot. And that'll be the most intriguing thing. We saw it was Jalen Adams last season, it was Derek Walton Jr. the season before that. It will be a high-level point guard to round out this roster.
Derek, the Brisbane Bullets, we know that you watch them closely. You're in Brisbane, you're seeing what's going on day in, week out. Where have you got this team at the moment?
Well, I'm sure it was very disappointing to miss out on the Will McDowell White sweepstakes. That was a big blow to them, and certainly if they would have been able to land him, it would have then given them great flexibility in building out this roster. Now they're in a tough spot. They've gotta get these 2 import positions, or whatever they're going to decide to do with Shannon Scott. I don't know what the latest is on that situation, Olgun, but these imports have to be game changers and be able to play 30-plus minutes a game with productivity and efficiency. I expect Justin Schuler's defense this season to have greater legs than it did last season. They were around 3rd, 4th in the league. for about 60% of the season in defensive efficiency, and then it fell apart at the end of the year. I think that will be extended. Overall, with the movement, and we've been through the controversy with Schuler and Sobey, I think it was a great move for both parties to go their separate ways. And now Schuler has the clear lane to put his imprint on Brisbane Bullets basketball, and he gets the chance to show what he can do.
So as of right now, there is no movement on the Shannon Scott situation. There is still a desire to buy him out of that contract. Again, they are preparing as though he won't be there. But I checked in this morning. As of right now, there is no update on that front. As for the rest of this team, I agree. They were betting on Will McDowell-White, the hometown kid, coming their way. He obviously decided to go to Europe. And so now it's all eyes on that import point guard spot. They saved a lot of money for McDowell-White, and now ostensibly all that money can go to filling those 1 and 2 spots that they're trying to fill with imports, replace Shannon Scott and Chris Smith. Again, they're a team that I think will get closer to Summer League in order to make that decision.
And we save the champions till last, the Tasmania JackJumpers, only because there hasn't been a lot of movement from the JJs. They haven't got a lot to do. It's just the import point guard spot.
That's it. And as of now, no movement. That can change. Obviously, Jordan Crawford is someone who's just sitting there in the ether, and it's still undecided from what I understand whether they're bringing him back or not. And so they're I think, as the champions, they're just chilling. They've got the crux of a championship core, and they can just sit back and wait and see what they do with the rest of with that import spot.
Good luxury to have, Ruck.
I like how they went and signed those bench guys, kind of like what we saw the Sydney Kings do also after their championships. Made sure the core of that team knew they were coming back and that they were appreciated, and that's exactly what Tasmania have done. Scott Roth is going to be there a while. They've got McVeigh, Dang, Drimmick, all those guys, and Magnay. They've got them all coming back. And Olgun, they're a real problem for years to come. We got to experience my State Bank Arena in person during the championship series. They've got a real asset in that 6-man down there. They defended the island. We've got to hear all that noise for another season now. And, you know, it's just a great story. I don't mean to be trite, but it really is a tremendous achievement, and not one that is kind of going to be passing in the night. This is here. This is sharp, and this is solid. The Tasmania JackJumpers ain't going nowhere.
Which is not good news for the rest of the competition, that the JackJumpers are going to be around for quite some time to come. That sees us out on the marketplace. Of course, don't forget, you can hit us up on social media. Any questions that you've got for Olgun or Derek or Pete Hooley during our marketplace series, we will get to you on the very next episode. Ruck, stay warm, stay happy up there.
Not a problem. It's all good up here. Guys, I look forward to the next one.
Look how happy he looks up there. Olgun, we'll catch you next time as well.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks for being with us. We'll catch you next time on the marketplace.